G'day folks, Scott here. Today I'm reviewing Pet Sematary. So I saw the remake of Pet Sematary last night. I decided to sleep on it before I did the review just to see if I felt any differently about it. I don't. It was okay. To be fair, I have a really strong sense of ownership, I guess, over Pet Sematary because it was my first Stephen King book. I got this novel in 1985, the first one I ever read, first horror book I ever read, and it made a big impression on me. I love it. I only revisited the book on Audible last year, thoroughly enjoyed going through it again, watched the old movie not too long ago, so I was well versed in Pet Sematary before I went there last night. Maybe that was a bad idea. My two friends that I went with haven't seen Pet Sematary for years. One of them had read the book, one of them hadn't, and they both came out of the movie pretty happy, whereas I was like, oh, what about this, what about that, change this, change that. So, straight off, if you've seen the trailers to this movie, as always I don't, I was really surprised by they blew the one major thing they changed from the book in the trailers. It seemed really weird to me. So if you haven't seen the trailers and you're somehow wanting to go in spoiler free, you should leave and come back after you've done so, because I'm going to talk about everything from this point on in the review. Is going to be trailer talk, movie talk, comparison to the old movie, so it'll be pretty heavy spoilers. Obviously most people who have seen the film and read the book know how it's going to go, but they have changed something, hence my warning. So there you go. So obviously fundamentally, which like I said, I can't believe they blew in the trailer, was the main difference is that Ellie dies instead of Gage. I found that interesting, I guess, because they wanted to do something new and not just rehash the same thing over again, and I applaud them for that. It both worked and didn't work, which I'll go over. I guess first and foremost, they really rushed the book. Especially the first half of the book, they're just plowing through it to get to the end horror part. So I guess they elongated the back end of the film and shortened the front half. Some of the shortening actually worked pretty well. They really trimmed a lot of that, but they also trimmed character development as that went on. So they rushed Rachel's character development and really brought the Zelda thing and all that early in the story, whereas that was held off till later and was sort of drip fed to you as time went on. They completely eliminated the really poor relationship with Rachel's parents that Lewis had. You only see them like once in the movie, I think, maybe twice. And there was no animosity or any of that, which again was a really big part of why Lewis made the choice he makes later in the story. So I thought that was a bit weak. My biggest thing I don't like, and again, I get that, we want to not modernize it, but just give you another take on it, was changing Judd so dramatically. I adore Judd from the book, and I think Fred Gwynne for the most part did a really good job as him in the other movie. Judd was a lovable guy, a knowledgeable guy. He'd been around the block heaps of times. He had this beautiful wife who passed away in the story, and he had a sad story, but he connected with the family, really gave Lewis a friend and a confidant. And he was a big part of it, but he was a lovely, lovely guy. And in this, he's not that. He's not necessarily dislikable, but he perhaps comes off as a bit distrustful, as in you can't really trust him. They almost played it for a while. There's, they changed the way Ellie found the Pet Sematary, where she'd gone off and done it on her own, and Judd almost confronted her at it, but he showed up. By the end of that scene, obviously, I guess I get that they play that scene out, and they play a lot of this movie out because there's a large amount of people who have never read the book and never seen the other movie. So if I could understand how the story unfolds to them, this remake, they would have a very different opinion to me. But yeah, Judd is not as likable, really, at all. He endears himself to the family, especially Ellie. But there's not that friendship, that bond between him and Lewis. They allude to it a little bit and they have a couple of sit-downs, but it's not the same. So that kind of bothered me. He was a recluse. His wife had already died. The house was a bit of a shambles, and yeah, that was missing. Like I said, the family dynamic with Rachel's parents versus Lewis was also missing. I figured out that they were going to do it differently because they didn't develop Gage at all as a character. In the movie a little bit, the original, and the book heavily, Gage's relationship with his father is really, really prominent, and they have a really good relationship, and Gage is this beautiful kid with, funny personality, and he's constantly speaking, and, that is a big part of it. And you saw him only a couple of times in the first half of this film, and I thought something was up then. Again, I guess they kind of switch it up, but the way they play out a few scenes in this is like, haha, we think we're going to do this, we're going to pull the rug out and do it differently, and I think that's a bit wanky. Like, when Ellie dies, they really, really sort of play with the, Gage running out to the road. It's just, Ellie was also on the road, and like, I get what you're doing. You don't have to play it like you're not, like, fucking around a little bit. So I found that a bit on the nose. And later again, when Judd was looking through the house, the original, I'm really all over the place here, sorry, when the original like ankle stabbing, slashing that Gage had done, they played out that scene again, but obviously it didn't happen, and then it was Ellie who did it a couple of minutes later. And I'm like, if you want to present this as a story and a retelling and going down the path where you're trying to distance yourself, I guess, from the original movie and the book by changing it, why do you keep having these wanky, like, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, we thought we were going to do it, but we didn't thing? I didn't like that approach. Church was cool, I guess. Like, I really liked the fact that Church, they didn't really develop the relationship between Ellie and Church as strong as it was, again, in the original material. So they kind of killed him much sooner in the story. I like that when Church came back, he had like a bung eye, was really cool, but he was a bit too hateful, When he came back before, kind of hated Lewis because Lewis was afraid of it because he was still just spun out by the fact that this thing had come back to life. But no one else knew. And Ellie still wanted to love Church, and Church was still fine with Ellie. It's just he stunk, and she couldn't wash the stink out. So she kind of like, I don't want him to sleep with me anymore, so on and so forth, because he reeks. But he didn't attack her, and didn't outwardly attack Lewis either until he would like try and push him around and throw him around. So yeah, I wasn't sure I like how they made him just a bastard and vicious right from the get-go. I liked how he's a little unpredictable when he comes back and you don't know where it's going originally. I liked the Pet Sematary set. I think that looked great. The deadfall and everything looked much better than it did in the other movie, and much more like the book describes it in the way I imagined it. But then they really fucked up the wandering from there. Like when they go up from the deadfall, I thought it was a missed thing where like Judd was, just step where I step, but there was none of the, it all being about almost an act of faith, like, don't think about it, don't look down, don't do anything, just walk steadily ahead and you'll make it. They didn't cover any of that. It was just step where I stepped. And then the journey from there to the place, the Micmac burial ground, was an arduous thing, both in the book and even in the other film. A really, really long, brutal journey. And this, it kind of just alluded, here's a bit of forest and here's a bit of swamp, and then we're there. Had the noises and all the stuff going on in the swamp, but it just didn't give you the impression they really had to suffer to get there. Like, Lewis was really spun out how Judd made it all the way previously and wasn't knackered, and was surprised by how far it went. And then the rock was almost impenetrable, and he needed a pick and a shovel, and it was a nightmare to bury him and stuff, and that was all different, The burial ground was just dirt, and they buried him like this deep and put some rocks over it. And I thought that was kind of lame, and yeah, that didn't work. For me, it wasn't the same. Also, they used real sets in the other movie. Like, it was amazing, the scenes they went through. There's even YouTubers who have gone over those scenes and revisited those locations. That is great. Whereas this, it was so bad and so obviously a set. Like, so many of the shots of Lithgow and Jason was just green screen almost. Like, it was so obvious they weren't there. And then when they were there, it was so obviously a studio location, like an indoor location that was built for the burial ground. I thought, fucking, if they pulled it off better than that in the late 80s, early 90s, and you make this look like a scene in a studio, you lost an opportunity and you fucked that up. I'm being pretty picky, but like I said, I have strong feelings to the book. So obviously we get to Ellie dying instead of Gage, and she comes back. When she came back, that was fucking great. Like, when she came back into the house and confronted her father, Lewis, that first scene was great. And the scene after, where she goes to bed and she asks him to lay down with her because she doesn't want to sleep, or doesn't really say, but again, she's got the same bung eye that the cat had, and she's just whack, and she's not entirely there. And I'm like, oh, this is good. I really like this. So that scene in the bed was fantastic. But then after that, Ellie didn't really work for me or pay off. Them trying to give her character and personality early in the movie, doing a ballet thing, and then Lewis finding her doing the ballet thing the next morning. I didn't like that. It didn't work. It seemed a bit stupid. So yeah, everything from there just changes. Obviously, Rachel comes home and, like in the trailer, Lewis is like, here's Ellie. Like, I thought you'd take longer. I need more time to get, decide how this is going to play out. And, I liked how the daughter cuddled the mum, and the mum fully rejects it and creates that animosity. Yeah, but then, apart from the fact that Judd knew what Lewis had done, and that's why Ellie went after him, again, was a bit weird. She didn't really have any animosity against Lewis, and I don't see why she had animosity against Judd across the road. The mum I understand, because she got rejected, but yeah, I mean, Lewis drugs Judd so he can go off and do the burial, and then, sort of Judd wakes up, comes across the road, knocks on the door. He's talking about it like, I know what you did, you better not, blah, blah, blah. So I guess Ellie was listening, and so she then was mad at him. I don't really know. That doesn't really work for me. But, her going over and killing Judd was okay. But again, I preferred the original scene. I feel like it was a missed opportunity. The fact that they made Ellie instead of Gage be the one that came back. Obviously, in the original film, it was really hard for them to film scenes of violence and to film Gage doing things because he's a little kid. And obviously they had to be protective and careful about how the way they went around it. So giving it a much older, like a 9-year-old girl, means that they were more free, I thought, to do things. Have her speak more and have her, more violent. But when they had a chance for her to be more violent, I guess she did, but they could have gone further. Yeah, I don't know. I think inevitably Gage is more terrifying as a principal, this toddler, than the older child is. But the scenes, where Ellie kills Rachel was pretty good and kind of sad, and it was a pretty cool moment. It was sort of brutal, the knife and that, but yeah, I don't know. It was okay. Like I said, I think I'm in too deep and I'm too invested in the original story that I'm struggling to let it go and let it go in its own direction. But I think them skipping over elements and just changing it too much. And lastly, rambling. Ellie dragging her mum to the graveyard is fucking bullshit. Lewis struggled massively to get her back. But having Ellie carry his mother through the cemetery, over the deadfall, through the swamps and all that kind of stuff, and get her up there is ridiculous. I didn't like that at all. That was a big problem. So the end is completely different, and I don't know how I feel about it. I like the throwback in the very opening scene with the shot of the sort of overpass of the forest and the camera going over Judd's house in flames and then going down to the Creed house, and the blood and all that going to the door. That was cool because obviously me knowing the story knew what that meant, and audience obviously wouldn't, who hadn't seen the original stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I think I didn't like it. I think I'll watch it again when it's out on Blu-ray or 4K later and see how I feel then, now that I can, have some time to move on from my thoughts about, my oppositive change, and see how I feel later. The actors were all fine. It was well shot. I don't really like all the unnatural nighttime they tried to put in, color grading and stuff, but it was fine. Apart from the shitty set with the Pet Cemetery, the Micmac burial ground, everything else was pretty cool. I don't know. Go see it for yourself. It's not awful. I've seen worse, but as usual, remakes, it seems kind of unnecessary. And that's it. So thanks for watching me ramble. Please subscribe to the channel, watch my other videos, and I'll see you next time.